Hey guys, Linker here updating your stargazing priorities off script but on point. Lots changed. So I was talking to a couple people that are paving towards the new endgame in chapter 38 to figure out the meta, and I'll explain all the placements with this little visual I made, as well as the progression in just a second, but before that, subscribe. I need you to, since YouTube's algorithm isn't simple or too nice to me, and about 80% of you aren't. Thank you so much, and let's get to it. So there's a couple things I should do if I do this right. I should briefly mention gazing and campaign progress changes that recently. Then I should probably talk about how to read this visual guide in regards to progression, investment, priorities, stuff like that. And after that's out of the way, I can go pick by pick and explain the logic behind it, so you make the right decisions to get ahead. So stargazing has changed. It's better than what it used to be. So the recent campaign shift with the reduced min power and you have weaker teams now, hero consistency is going to be better than hero diversity because you have reduced min power. And that means boss stages are going to be what's blocking you. So by the time this video is out, you'll probably have the patch drop where min power is instead of 3.3, it's about a power factor of 5. This means that you'll face much more stages, and you'll face those boss stages and probably get stuck on them unless you're scripting all the way. So because of this, you probably need something that's consistent, because eventually, if you're somebody that mains a 4-faction hero that's inconsistent, you'll probably have issues. A good example of this is Gwyneth, who relegated to be slightly weaker than what she used to, which is very sad. She's a very strong hero, don't get me wrong, but she hates invades, and without a buff to her comp recently, she's steadily falling off from grace. Still incredibly strong, but just not as consistent as other sets like the God comp. So because of this meta shift, you need to be gazing right. Those Gwyneth mains, once they get to a comp or they have something that invades a lot, they're going to be stuck. And this is what you want this visual for, how to not get stuck in the end game and make graceful progression. So let's talk briefly about this visual, like what are you supposed to do with it, what is it, who is it targeted for, how to read it, anything. So these are going to be instructions that are targeted at newer players who want to play the end game perfectly. Now stick with me because I'm going to explain this. It has 11 heroes, all Celestials and Hypogeans that are mainly obtained through gazing. I know this means unlike last time, I'm leaving Ziz and Wukong, stuff like that out of it. Flora too. The reason I'm not advising those situational gazes might be strong, even the good ones like Assist for the God comp, is that I want this guide to assume perfect play. I'd rather have you understand why each pick is made and kind of adjust it and tweak it for yourself than have me poorly explain all the possibilities for whatever you could have and then just kind of mislead you. So this assumes you acquire Aziz by coins in time. It also assumes you gaze correctly, meaning you balance out hero choices and gaze in optimal heroes to progress. For example, chapter 15 to 20, you could focus on choice summoning a very good carry like Damon if you haven't gotten one yet. But you could also be, if you already got one, you can start picking your support heroes like Rowan or somebody like that. But assuming you did everything right, you should be able to kind of fit these heroes through. I made them each for a specific stage and we're gonna go through them right now. So it goes from left to right, top to bottom. Row 1 is mid-game to 31-4, so these are going to be the heroes that you want to acquire very early. Row 2 is 31-4 to late game at chapter 33, where you finally start facing those 5 sets. They're weakened, but still lots of teams. Row 3 is late game to end game at chapter 35. So these are going to be the heroes that you grab as you spec into those 5 sets and compete at higher levels. And row 4 is the end game for it. Just everything that we didn't mention and the right order for it. Once you get to chapter 35 and further, once you acquired most key heroes, this is what you should look for. And the borders are going to be at essential levels, which we'll talk about. But this does not advertise stars. The reason I didn't want to advertise stars, and it's good that I remember this, is that it's more effective to get your signature items boosted beyond 30 than it is to gaze for stars. We did the research, we know this now, stats are just more efficient this way. Now let's just dive into it and explain that progression. Now starting off with the first hero you should gaze should be Talene. Once you get to chapter 15, you get your 10 gazer cards, you get the guaranteed hero you should do Talene, and the reason is that even at Elite Ascension, she's just very, very significant. She does what she does very, very well. If you look at her here, the healing, all the healing that she does is just so strong, even at low scaling, can really clutch you certain sets, can really help you out as a support hero. So my first hero that you should get should be Talene right at chapter 15. She'll help you out in campaign, she'll help you out at KT, and she'll be very, very strong even at first gaze. The second one you should get to Elite is Twins. Now the reason you get Twins to Elite right after Talene is that they're very, very strong in all those mods that require this kind of progression. You'll get them to Ascended in just a second if you can see, but getting them to Elite is crucial for Guild Boss, even some campaign stages is really, really strong. Some people that really like Abyssal can get them to E+. At this stage, I personally recommend Elite because the next one that you'll grab will have a very good reason and kind of flexibility behind her. Now next, and this is going to be one you need to understand what you do, is going to be Alna. Now, why do you want to do Alna? The reason is very simple. It's going to be her Winter's Call. Winter's Call triggers right at the start of the battle and gives her long immunity. Now, this later scales with a signature item to incredible stuff that she always gives herself. And with a furniture, she can give it to all allies, which is why you get her an Ascended much, much later. But the reason you want her at Elite is that she's a very strong immune hero that you could acquire right away. Say, if you do Daemon carry or Isolde carry, one of those carries that really needs strong teammates to kind of take off damage while they spiral out, you want Alna at Elite. Alna at Elite will survive long, and if you time her correctly, can really, really do great things. We also know she's mistranslated. We know that it should be about 30. I'm not completely sure about this, so I don't want to go off on a tangent, but Alna is a very strong hero. Even at Elite, we're pretty confident, despite how new she is, that just her immunity will allow her to pave great at those Daemon sets and Isolde sets for campaign, and we also suspect that her passive might be very strong with certain combinations. For example, Leica. So the thing is that once you reduce all enemy haste by 40, if you increase your own team's haste by a certain threshold, you can get very, very efficient with this. So Alna, even at Elite, might be very viable in specific sets for your campaign. I highly advise you get her. Maybe not if you do something like, I don't know, Mehira carry really early or something like that, but with most carries, even at Elite, she can sometimes be what saves you, so I recommend you quickly grab one copy of her. Next, and this is the first important one, you're going to take Twins all the way up to Ascended. Reason is that right now God Comp, like the most cheap version of God Comp, is going to be Rowan, which you can acquire for yourself, as this is what you do with coins. It's going to be Tassie, and it's going to be Source. So Tassie freezes very, very strong, can substitute Mehira. Source can substitute Talene. And because it can substitute all of them, and that set works great against campaign, and it also has great boss value, taking Twins all the way up to Ascended will give them a lot of stats, a lot of tankiness, and will allow them to fit on this set. So it's a very consistent set that you can get very, very early, and you won't pay much for it because at those stages of the game, you should still be doing all the way while you level up your Twins. You should be focusing on your main carry that you got through your hero summons, whether it's Aaron that can kind of enjoy Twins, whether it's Daemon that's a little bit less obvious to fit with them. You just do them all the way to chapter 31, so that by 31 you have Twins, and then all that's separating you and the God Comp is just a couple of hero choices, and eventually a couple of gazes to get those stronger type heroes. But Twins to Ascended is a new change. They overtake Talene because of the recent substitutes that we found out. Very, very strong across those modes, also strong in TR, also strong in Abyssal, strong in all modes, heavily recommended to get them to Ascended. And the next one, this is a new one, but since Lucretia's rework, and hear me out here, she is just so much stronger. She's so much more consistent. Just look at her new abilities. Just look at what she does. We see her. We have the data right now to support that Lucretia Ascended is in fact an amazing campaign carry. Does great even in PvP. I heavily recommend that you get her very, very early. She's a great second set material. She's very consistent if she can pull off her thing. I still classify her as cheese because you essentially let all your allies die and then you need to invest in a signature item to get all this value. But even despite the investment, she's worth this thing. And the reason is that by the time you get Twins, you should be able to grab the God Comp fairly easily, some variant of it. And getting a second set that's so cheap to fit, she can work with virtually most anything, which is so valuable. So this is exactly the reason Twins and Lucretia at this order that I value Stargazing over 4 faction. I think once you get Twins, Source, Roman, Aziz, and Tassie, and once you get Lucretia, you will mostly have 2 pretty consistent sets against most anything. So you'll be able to really, really progress far and then grab those stronger heroes as you go along. Now that you grabbed some good heroes like twins, like Lucretia, and you have good sets, you probably did some choice summons, so you have some flexibility, but mainly you have those very consistent sets we talked about. I want to talk to you about Mehira. Mehira, even at Elite, can sometimes do incredible things. Not only can she be used for haste on certain bosses for a Twisted Realm, she's also very, very strong even at Elite Plus just for the way that her ultimate scales. She makes enemies attack each other, and I know Tassie substitutes her to decent success, but even at KT, even at campaign, even at min power that's gonna reduce, sometimes Elite Mehira will be just so strong. And I've tested this, I've valued it, and after consulting with some top players, we think you should grab Elite Mehira this early, even before you gaze Talene all the way, and we think that it'll bring you the value back and the flexibility. So if you get really, really, really stuck, you have all the tools you need to get unstuck up until those chapter 33, which is where you should be by the time that you end this second row. Now you're going to go back to Talene. Talene appearing 7th hero, or the 3rd ascended hero, but with the changes, twins are just better in the god comp, it's hard to deny, and Lucretia is so strong. So if you can't really invest in Lucretia, you're so barred on signature items that you just can't move, maybe you can move even Talene before her. Much more of the time, you'll want to invest in her to get that second set, and then make your first set stronger. So having the flexibility with Talene and the god comp, and maybe with Saurus instead of Tassie, maybe Saurus instead of Talene, this kind of flexibility will make your god comp so much stronger, so much better. It'll give it this first kind of burst where you all of a sudden can progress so much through campaign, because this set is so consistent, so good. Even with the recent sets rising, it's hard to deny that God Comp is the most consistent set. The only reason there's heroes that take priority is that they're very cheap to invest in and get sets working, but Talene, the strongest hero in the game in my opinion, one of my favorite, and the second mascot of this channel, finds her safe spot where you should take her all the way to Ascended so that she can not only support you once she's mythic, but once you've invested in her, she can be a main part of your God Comp and carry you forward. Now, my first pretty much hot take, but you could argue that all of these is going to be Mehira to Ascended. Now, people say, take her to Mythic. She enjoys a signature item a lot. The signature item 30 makes her much more consistent. And while she does have some subs like Tassie, she's the queen of that God Comp slot, especially in campaign. Now, I say Ascended, few reasons. First of all, power cap might be relevant. Second of all, I think the furniture is relevant because the furniture, once you get 3 pieces, the minions attack go back. It does take time, but the healing makes her proc her ultimate more consistently. I think the stats are worthwhile. I think her damage scales very well. I think if you grab Mehira all the way to Ascended, she will not fail you in those God Comp slots because you essentially have all the God Comp at that point. You got twins, you got Talene, you got Mehira. If you have all of them Ascended, it's just very hard to go wrong. Now, you could alternatively do Mehira to Mythic to jump forward a little bit and then do her to Ascended later when you really need that God Comp power. But I say by the time you get to chapter 33, I put it right there. I think it's reasonable that you get your Mehira on point. Also, very strong hero, scales off of enemies kind of like Thorin. She will probably enjoy the new min power requirements, probably surprise some of you that didn't know how good she is against enemy scaling, making the enemies attack into each other. So you've grabbed all these strong campaign heroes. You have Lucretia, you have the God Comp, you have 1 or 2 hero choice summon sets, and now you're looking for something to spice it up. You're looking for some hot synergies. You're looking for something that can take meta aggression and burst. You're looking probably for your Zolrath. Zolrath is one of those heroes that can really spice up your composition. First of all, incredibly strong in PvP, still the hands down best PvP hero in my opinion. 3 out of 3 just so strong in those burst sets. Once you have just Zolrath, you can obviously compete in PvP, even in LC if you are, but this is not just for LC, this is for campaign as well. I think his priority is this high and justifiably so. He can just spiral out. He can sometimes solve you those campaigns where you are against burst and you just don't know what to do. He can counter many strong enemies like Athalia to just rush to your side of the field. He's a very strong hero many people sleep on. And I believe once you get to chapter 33, it's your time to pick up those auxiliary picks, those luxury picks that will really spice up your comp. And even though the next one is the mascot of this channel, I think Zolrath is going to be one that you won't regret picking first at this row. And now for my favorite channel mascot, Orthos. even with all the recent introduction, Orthos finds a comfy slot about halfway through. Once you get to chapter 33, you really enjoy how defensive and stally this guy is. With the new introduction we'll talk about in a second, but pauses time, allows allies to move, does the signature item that stuns people, underestimate that, recover through. You also just grab Zoroark, so you can use Orthos and Zoroark in many campaign sets. Obviously the enhanced sets like Aaron strongly too, so just a very strong synergy to grab one after the other. You want both of these on Ascended because they do go off scaling and they both want to be very strong. Orthos, one of those that goes in those style comps. Maybe you already grabbed this as, and maybe you're considering a Thalia or Flora and you grab Flora. So Orthos, Talene, Flora is going to be another core that you can get. So you have your Sora set, you have your Lucretia set, like the Source God comp, unless you have a Talene, Orthos, Flora set that you can stall with. So you gain this flexibility by gaining these two heroes. I believe are going to be very strong. And Orthos at this spot, I believe, is one you won't regret. But you can change him with this next pick. Alna, the new hero, was mad hyped. Now, you already grabbed it on lead for this niche stuff that you sometimes do on Damon sets, but once you hit chapter 33, coming towards 34, maybe even 35, Alna is going to be very, very strong with her stall synergies. She's very strong by slowing all enemies on the field. She goes with many other heroes like Aaron that slow things around, like Leica that haste your own team. She's very, very strong, and you can also allow to yourself to invest in her at this point, allowing other allies to gain immunity. Obviously, very, very prominent in those Daemon sets that want 2 immune heroes. So if you want Thorin Jesus, another set, you can kind of free Thorin from your defensive Daemon comp, and then kind of go for Brutus Alna or Alna and somebody else on the top. I don't like Thorin Cheese myself, but I think the flexibility she brings to the table in her own carry sets and the way that she can slow and CC enemies just so prominently with those translation errors that I'm still working on is so strong. Alna is going to be one of those auxiliary heroes that you want to grab, synergizes with many things, and not that hard to fit. Now, if you're here, we're talking endgame, and if we're talking endgame, you want to be ready for the events and for the bosses. Mortis is not the strongest Typogen, but what he does have going for him is the buff. The buff is just really strong, so you probably want him Babel for AE, so you might want to make him E+. At this point, you're towards the end game, so you can grab all kinds of heroes. You can flex this up if you see those Mizoth sets that you want. If you're super PvP focused, and maybe Zafrael. But at that point, you probably want this guy at Elite just to get this extra bonuses. It'll pay off in the long run because you can run him against Twisted Realm. If he ever becomes viable, there is one that I highly suspect will, as we discover him later, but for sure in AE and all these other modes. Very cheap investment as well. And once you've sidetracked to grab Mortis at E, you want to go back on track and you want to grab your campaign and PvP heroes. The next list is kind of, you can really play with it around, but I feel like Mizoth is the most flexible one of these at little investment, because after grabbing Zoroark, Orthos, and Alna, all 3 of which requiring lots of investment, furniture for all of them, signature item for all of them if you want to compete at some rates, just at this point you want somebody cheap, strong, tanky that can just run into the front line and be effective. And Mizoth is exactly that. So Mizoth is a very tanky, very strong hero. Not necessary, not that one that you first pick in the first row because he can carry on his own and he's not that obvious to support, but he's the definition of a tank and he's one hero that's very good to pick. So after you grab that, now you're free with a little bit more investment resources. We're going to talk about the next tower, and that's going to be Zafrael. So you have your signature item and your furniture stuff to invest in. Zafrael is going to surprise you. In campaign, it's going to go with Peepa, it's going to go with Screg, even with Odin sometimes experimenting with him, but we see him very prominent 36 and forward. In PvP, super strong, and at this point you care about PvP. Obviously, once you get to this point, maybe some heroes will change around. Depends on who you are. If you watch this and you have most heroes, then you might have the luxury of getting him already. But a very strong hero, it just takes lots of investment and doesn't reward us other heroes who take similar amount of investment, not as flexible, but nonetheless very strong. So you want him at Ascended so that he can scale properly. Lastly, and that's very sad, but with many carries rising up to the prominence, Khazad is going to be one that falls off. Khazad is very strong, don't get me wrong here. He's just very frail, very risky. So even though he fits in those Gwyn sets, Gwyn kind of falling from viability, very strong hero, don't get me wrong. I love Khazad, but just not the one that you want to get first. But once you've gotten to the point where you can get him, and I personally have him ascended already invested because I invested him way before all these heroes came out, I love that guy. He freezes, he sees his signature item still. With Alna might be really, really strong. And this guy's a lot of guys are sleeping on this, so check that out. But anyways, very, very strong CC oriented hero that slows, that stuns, that does everything you want from him. Once you got to that point, obviously it's the last one you have to get to Ascended, except the one last one that we'll talk about in a second, and that's definitely what you want to do. And lastly, yeah, this guy's underwhelming at Ascended. He's just not as good in campaign, in PvP. I mean, I've seen him in LC a little bit, but probably doesn't demand the investment right away. Maybe forecast it if you're super PvP oriented and you don't like his frailty. But this guy's overall more or less a little bit underwhelming on the side. He's the last one that we have left, so take him all the way to Ascended once you got here. And you're at the end game. So if you followed with me through, you'll be able to prioritize everything from start to end. You'll understand where to fit your hero choice summons because you know why you need each one of these heroes and when will you expect to get them. And if you will do it, I believe you'll get through. So like, subscribe, and I've been Linker. Peace.